afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our roundtable on the return to production. The last few months have been nothing less than traumatic for the world of sport. And as there was no playbook about what we do when a pandemic completely decimates the sports calendar, there really is no playbook about what we do when we return to live production in that new environment. For this reason, we thought that it would be now as good time as ever to exchange experiences and learnings. And that was our motivation in creating this event. Although all of you are operating in slightly different environments and under different sets of restrictions, we're confident that the ideas and the solutions that you will hear today will be very useful to you in preparing your operations for the upcoming events. I am now going to give the floor to our moderator, Cliona O'Leary, Deputy Head of Sport at RTE, who is going to present our speakers and start the conversation. Cliona?
Thanks, Elsa. Thanks also to Frank and Clotilde and all of the team in the EBU for arranging this Return to Play live webinar. It's been really challenging for all of us involved in sports production over the past few months and trying to fill our schedules. And now with the return to live play, there's so many more considerations we have to take on board. Some of us are more ahead than others with live sports returning in our countries at different times, but this is a great opportunity to learn from each other and to share ideas on new and emerging best practice. So hopefully we will cover all of the angles for you over the next hour, but please use the Q&A function to ask questions, and we will try to answer as many of them as we can towards the end of the session. So we're delighted to be joined by a great team of experts. Trevor Turner is Head of Media Systems Development with Formula One, and it's super to have a perspective from a federation. And we're also joined by our colleagues from the Netherlands, Austria, Spain, and Slovenia. Welcome to Brigitte Janssen from NOS, Martin Krischke from ORF, and Yolanda Garcia from Cuevas from RTVE, and Mateja Mir from RTV. So Trevor, if we could start with you. Congratulations on the return to live play. You're one of the first international events to return, having had two successful races in Austria over the past 2 weekends. Tell us the amount of planning. I read that there was over 10,000 tests, the amount of planning that you've had to put into this in order to be able to deliver it in COVID times. Can you give us a sense of, or some detail around what it took for you to get back on the road?
Thanks for inviting me to talk on this seminar. Yes, it's been a huge challenge to get back to racing for us. But yes, we've had a couple of successful events now in Austria, and we're off to Hungary this weekend. I think the key to it really is, as you've said, is the amount of confidence that we had to plan for, that we could safely undertake the events. Top of our list for all of the conversations around returning to racing was around our personnel safety in these COVID times. So not just ourselves, clearly, but all of the stakeholders involved in a traveling global event to make sure that we don't add any additional risks in trying to move that number of people into the into a circuit or a stadium with meaning, bringing making them susceptible to potential infection. Sorry, I'm stumbling a bit. The planning that we did was ostensibly around working with our major stakeholders, the teams, the broadcasters, ourselves, the FIA, the federation, and the countries involved, to make sure that we can come up with a plan which would allow us to start racing. And to do so, at the top of the list, we had to make sure that we could test our staff satisfactorily, and everybody involved and be able to present a unified approach to the satisfaction of everybody involved, that we could manage the risks appropriately to commence the event. This meant that we, as an organization, reached out to a European-wide, I guess, forensic and testing organization to be able to manage those tests for us. And so we embarked on a testing process initially at the office. This is for us. We needed to have some people come in back to the office to start planning. Clearly, there's a lot of working from home going on. Clearly, there's the ability to use systems like Zoom and Teams today to be able to achieve a great deal. But we still needed to have people come into the office to start to prepare what we needed to do. So to do so, we embarked on a testing program every week, in fact twice a week initially, with a European provider to make sure that we weren't putting people at risk. And then that plan was rolled out across the entire Formula One operation, alongside making sure that people would only come into contact with people that are absolutely necessary at the events, and that we understood fully and in detail what was required of those people at an event. So people, where they would be going, who would they be in contact with, have these people been tested? There's a very strict regime at the circuit. Only people who have valid negatives tests are allowed to enter the circuit. And from that came the ability to be able to then start to plan how the event could be run from a more normal perspective. Is that enough?
Yes, yeah, a phenomenal amount of planning that needed to go into it, and huge resources, I'm sure, as well. We might move on to Brigitte. I know for you, you haven't covered any events yet, but your major focus is on the Tour de France, which is another monstrous event, and I'm sure that they'll have a lot to learn from what Formula One has done in terms of setting things up for a federation. What are the biggest challenges facing you in your planning for this event?
Hi, hello. Well, for us, the most important thing is safety and health for our people who are going to be working on the Tour de France. And yeah, in NOS, we're always looking on a production like its own production. Is it necessary to send people somewhere? Is it not necessary? Can they stay at home? And in that, we all depend on what decisions are made by ASO, by the government in France, but also our own government. So, and that changes every day. So it's like if I can compare it to last year, I mean, I had like 3-4 months to prepare this big operation, because NOS is going with 50 people most of the time to France to do like at the start, at the finish, and a live TV show every evening. This year we go with a small amount of people to France, and we are depending on the rules of ASO. What can we do? And if we know that we can make our own production, what are we going to do? So that's always like talking to each other, and we have daily, weekly contact with them via Teams, of course. Yeah, and also there are a lot of new things which are now in the production we have to take care of, like the safety of our people, what I told before, but also like yeah, how is everything going to be in France? Can we travel? With how many people? How are the hotels? So it's like from a macro niveau, but also micro niveau. And it changes every day. So that's the most difficult part of it. But what stands first? It's the safety and the health of our own people.
Thanks, Brigitte. And yeah, there's always huge amount of I suppose correspondence between federations and broadcasters in trying to manage our schedules and work together as much as we can. But now more than ever, we can see how critical it is. Maybe Mateja, you are a broadcaster with us that has experience of covering a live event so far, which is really interesting for us. So you've been covering the National Football League live. So what are the health and safety protocols that you've been following, and what contingencies do you have in place in case of a positive test?
Yes, we have been covering live football matches since mid of June. And we are following all the health and safety protocols set by National Football Federation, as well as the Slovenian health authorities. before the restart of the championships, all athletes had to undergo the tests. They had to be negative in order to proceed with the championships. As far as RTV Slovenia is concerned, we had to minimize our staff as much as possible due to the fact that the maximum people allowed on the stadium. This was at the beginning 200 people, and it included all host broadcaster staff, football officials, delegations, the clubs, and the spectators. Afterwards, it was lifted to 500 people. Mostly the matches are taking place without the spectators. As to the health and safety rules, we have to send the names of our staff in advance to the organizers. Once on stadium, they have their temperature taken, and they have to wear face coverings, especially the ones that are situated in the OB van. And there is also limitation of the number of technicians that are basically allowed during the match on the pitch, because there is a limitation of who can actually access or be around the pitch during the match. But as far as our programming is concerned, this is very interesting. Due to the lack of the live sports program, we basically increased our production, in meaning that we have more pre and post-match program than if there was a normal sports situation.
Wow, that's interesting. Yeah, because I suppose in some cases, like I know from our point of view, we're reducing down our build-up because we have I suppose less people coming into the studio, ability to have less kind of panelists coming in, and so we're trying to do maybe a little bit less. So it's interesting to hear some broadcasters maybe are going for more. Yolanda, have you covered any live events yet, and what have you learned so far?
Not yet. What we are doing is a lot of the studio programs, and a lot of programs from home, connecting people, making interviews, new formats. You have to develop new formats in order to have something live. It's not real, it's not events, live events, but at least it's live programs. We want to start till next month with some cycling, and we as NOS, we won't go. This time we won't go on site for the Tour de France. We will make everything from home in order to save and to avoid any program that could have on site in healthy terms.
Okay, and like Trevor, you know, when it comes then to broadcasters, like and their needs and requirements, I suppose, what kind of on-site services? I'm sure that you probably have less people traveling to the site yourself, and I'm presuming, you know, less broadcasters are turning up as well. What on-site services are you offering at the Grand Prix? Is it less than normal? And like, how are you managing the driver media interactions as well?
Yes, that's right. There's less facilities available at the circuit. Again, it's driven by headcount numbers, really, making sure that only the people that are there are there to do what we need to do. So in terms of broadcaster facilities on site, and you know, Martin can perhaps speak on this a little bit too. We did significantly reduce the amount of video services that we provide broadcasters on site, predominantly because we're producing those in the UK now, and getting those available back to the circuit for broadcast consumption is difficult from a technical latency point of view. But all of our multilateral transmissions and a lot of our additional services are transmitted from our UK offices now. And so there was a requirement on our broadcasters to understand that what we would normally hand off to the partners on site would not be as a complete set of facilities as normal. What we did hand off is an international program. We handed off the ability to see all of the various data feeds and information and additional services that we have. along with the local press conferences. We do have a requirement to make those services available to the teams in the garages and throughout the circuit in any case for regulatory and sporting regulation reasons. So there was a need to do that. But in terms of being able to make all of our on-car camera feeds, for example, available on site, we weren't able to do that in our current remote setup. In terms of changing how we did things, you may have seen that, for example, the podium celebrations now are socially distanced, and indeed with robots on Sunday for the trophy presentations. We also had normally we would have press conference facilities where we'd have the written media in a studio along with the drivers. This is now being done using a Zoom style conference calling, so the journalists at home can still ask real-time questions of the drivers, 2 at a time, team by team, or at the top 3 as after qualifying all the race, so that again in a socially distant studio setting, so they're not all sitting close together, they're the right distance apart, along with the right face masks and things, again to make sure that we only have the minimum number of people coming in and out of the event as possible to keep control of any possible infection. We also had interviews usually with other drivers down in the paddock area during sessions. Again, these are managed differently. We have a much bigger press conference now on a Thursday where all of the drivers are interviewed team by team sequentially. So it's something like getting on for 2.5 hours long now by the time each team's had 10 minutes to talk about what it's doing, and everybody's had a chance to ask their questions. So these are some of the things that we changed, both because of the technical changes to remote production, but also to make sure that we could maintain social distancing in those areas where people needed to do interviews.
Quite a number of adjustments there that were done from Trevor and the team in Formula One. Martin, I think your mic has been fixed, so just checking with you there. What, like, from your point of view, like in terms of the production and the editorial, how did you find it, and you know, what changes did you have to bring into your production as well as a result of some of those changes?
Good afternoon, everybody. I think the biggest change and the biggest problems were that we had to break up all the routine and the workflows we were used to, because Formula One is a product which we are doing for years, and people are used to have a certain workflow. And especially right now, there are so many restrictions that our team cannot follow. So we had to set up new workflows, new editing facilities, like we did some editing back home in Vienna, and all this together was really, really difficult for our team to stick to, because you know, when you're doing Formula One for 20 years and you have a very strict workflow that is given by FOM and FIA, and then suddenly something new comes into the place, you have to throw everything overboard and create everything new, and this was the most difficult way for us.
And you know, I've seen that, like in the UK, when they're covering the Premier League, that, you know, with match coverage, I think that the lack of spectators can really impact. Like, from your point of view with Formula One, Martin, was there any difference with the fact that there wasn't any spectators at the race?
I would say, because we have live football matches as well from the Austrian League, football compared to Formula One in terms of spectators, I would say that there were no spectators wasn't a big issue for the Formula One from an editorial point of view, because the stadium atmosphere is not the same as in a football stadium. The product itself lives from the atmosphere, from the cheering, from the yelling, whatever, and you don't hear that the same when you're doing Formula One. Of course, for the director, it was a problem because he couldn't show any fans or chanting people or whatever. But basically, from an editorial point of view, it wasn't a big issue like in football.
And Brigitte, coming back to you again, in terms of looking ahead, and you haven't had live sport so far, but you're going to have an awful lot of live sport, I'd imagine, very much like a lot of us. An awful lot of sports are coming back into our calendars from September onwards. It's going to be quite a challenge to try and fit everything in. What are you looking at going into September? How are you planning for that?
Well, at first we are really happy that it's going to start again, because there was nothing during the month from March until I think mid of August in Holland. The soccer has been cancelled. Everything has been cancelled. So we had some broadcast shows, and that was all on an historical point of view. So we like the European Championships, soccer, and the World Championships soccer, the Tour de France, everything with historical things. But now in September we are going to broadcast hopefully everything live again. As I said before, it's all pending. It's all changing every day. And what also is going on is that, for example, the Tour de France is always in summertime. So in summertime there is nothing going on regarding, well, nothing. That's not always true, but regarding news, regarding elections, regarding government things. So we have a lot of airtime to broadcast all the live sports. That's different in September. So we have to, especially for the time slots where we're going to broadcast everything, there is something in between, like, and also still there is, like, the COVID-19 is still going on. So there is news regarding that. So it's fitting all the time, and most of the things will be last minute production, I guess. So is it going on? Is it not going on? We have everything prepared, and we're going to roll it out. And during the live event, we're going to see what's happening, because there is, still the virus that's going around. So that's how we try to manage. We're fully speed in production now, and in thinking of what are we going to do? What are we going to broadcast?
Yeah, it's extremely challenging, isn't it? Like, I suppose some of us have one channel, linear channel, some of us have two linear channels, some of us have digital solutions that are more sophisticated than others as well. So to try and fit all of the sports in over the coming months is going to be quite a challenge. Mateja, from your point of view, similar to NOS, you're covering the Tour de France as well. Are you planning to send staff on site for that tournament, and are you reducing it, or what is the impact for you in covering the Tour de France this year?
Yes, it's true. We are sending our staff on site for the Tour de France this year, and if it all goes well, we intend to send 2 bonded ENG crews, which is in fact more than in the past editions of this race, because we are really looking forward to this event, which usually took place during the summer, but cycling in Slovenia is hugely popular due to the two prominent Slovenian cycling stars, Roglic and Pogačar, and the audience is in fact hungry for live sports events. So besides the live TV program, the live broadcast of the races, we are using also official TV Slovenia Sports social media account to try to engage more audience in watching the race live and invite them basically to interact by asking questions, which are then answered during the show itself. So we intend also to have much more program than in the past season after the races. To have more interviews, either from on-site if it's possible, immediate reactions from the cyclists or the teams, and then through also the expert cyclists, which will hopefully come to our studio. But as Brigitte from NOS mentioned, it will be a little bit of a problem for RTV Slovenia as well, because this year the race is taking place in September, where also other studio productions are coming back. So we are at the moment having quite a few difficulties in finding the right studio, the right setup, the right AR background, etc. So it will be a challenge, and hopefully everything will go well and as planned.
We hope it does, Mateja, for you. Like you were saying there with social media, it's really important to look at every way that we can communicate with the audiences through all of our different digital options as well. Yolanda, for you, Martin mentioned about the spectators there, and Mateja was talking about the social media importance of that around the Tour de France coverage. Have you plans around any other innovations or anything that you're doing in Spain as well to add to your upcoming productions?
Well, innovations itself, for example, for spectators, it's true that it was strange at the beginning, not having anyone. But for example, the Soccer League, what they do is they put digitally a new solution with ambience and with a background that makes the sensation that there's spectators on site. So that's a good idea, a good innovation, and I'm sure the rest of the sports will make the same, because at the end you need this ambience. And for new, as I said before, new formats, we are developing the formats and new ways of doing things, and restarting the production with new ideas, because we will have the same problem as everyone on September, because everything will be there. We won't know how we will make our grid. It's going to be a mess, but we'll do it for sure. We have a sports channel, 24-hour channel, so there's a space, and also on digital we have many solutions to make things available. But the problem is that the audience is not used to this. So more than having solutions, technical solutions for this, what we have to insist a lot is on promotion and how to bring people the option to watch everything, because people is ready to this on paid channels. They are used to it, but not on free-to-air channels. So it's not gonna be easy, but this is where we focus right now.
But sometimes, you know, it's a good thing to challenge ourselves and to try and do things differently, because, you know, sometimes we can keep doing the same things the same way as well. And, you know, in a way, like, there's an opportunity here for us to be able to look at some of the things that we're doing that we might be able to bring with us into the future as well, and it might change. So, like, from a federation point of view, Trevor, just what you've learned from what you've implemented and adopted, like, is there anything there that you have done now for Austria and for the upcoming races that, you know, you might think, well, actually, you know, going forward, we'll adopt these permanently? Yes,
good question. I think, yes, there are things that we would adopt permanently. It's maybe a little too early to say to the extent to which we would adopt everything. Clearly, we're still in the processes of working on what the shape of the season will be, and you know, technical challenges may still come at us depending on where events may be announced. But you know, as you say, it's a good thing to be able to push in these sort of situations to make sure that you know, we challenge ourselves to be able to see what we can do. And as I said at the beginning, this is something we've been planning for a couple of, well, certainly for 18 months, for something to look to do in 2 or 3 years down the line. That we've brought it forward quickly based on the thinking we had to date. Has been a challenge, but it has been, we believe, largely successful. I think some of the things that we learned was, and maybe picking up on Martin's point, but also on Yolanda's point, is that, you know, supporting the broadcasters as much as we can, bearing in mind that the situation every day changes and what can and can't be done, and where we started in May to where we've arrived at in July are very different circumstances now. But in order to get something moving of the scale of Tour de France or Formula One, you do have to make some decisions and stick to them, because if you allow yourself too much time to adjust to the information as it comes in, then you're just going to make it more difficult for yourself. So whilst I appreciate that we had to make some decisions which disrupted, as Marta said, the workflows of broadcasters, fundamentally we had to make sure that we could produce an international program live, that the sport could actually restart, and we could keep our fans and our spectators and our audience engaged, and to that point, using our digital platforms, both public and private, to be able to support that is probably quite key too. So we have a broadcaster platform to supply content within our broadcaster community. It's not a public platform, but being able to post as much content as possible to that platform for our broadcast partners to be able to access was key, because without that support, it's very difficult to provide any pre-show material or post-show material when the limitations of who's on site from a broadcaster perspective are also impacting on people. I think that I agree that remote production is and has been disruptive. It's been disruptive for everybody, but I think we see that as the future, and we want to help our broadcast partners to be able to reassess perhaps how they do things after so long, without damaging the products, without impacting their ability to tell the story to their subscribers and customers. And we're sort of introducing new technologies, various cloud-based technologies as well, to deliver content in real time to help that situation. So maybe it's happened much quicker than any of us would have wanted, but I think we've definitely set off in the right direction here, and we will grow from this position. To the extent that it stays as it is, I'd like to think so, but time will tell.
Trevor, you mentioned there about remote productions, and I know an awful lot of us as broadcasters are doing more and more remote production. I suppose different people have different solutions, and like, you know, I know that our Scandinavian colleagues are very advanced in this regard, that they have they do a remote production from shooting a match with a number of cameras there remotely, which is phenomenal. And then I know, like, for example, ourselves, we would do a lot of our commentaries off tube and might not send to a lot of broadcasts where you get a live feed in. But to what extent, Martin, on the Grand Prix, did you have remote production solutions? Like, how remote were you in terms of your people working in front and behind the scenes?
For the signal itself, it wasn't really a remote production, but what we have learned is that we can, since whenever you have a core team on site, like 1 or 2 editors, it's enough to provide any material, any line, whatever, back home to Vienna, which where all the others can edit this material. So even when you're producing in your home country, you can save up sending people on site. So we've reduced from like 10 editors back down to 4. And all the others were staying back home in Vienna, and the editing and the dubbing and whatever was necessary for post-production, they did it back home in Vienna. So it's enough to send like a core team on site and let the people do their work, and everybody else stays at home.
And is that something, Martin, that you think that, you know, going forward, you will look to maybe send less people to events?
Yeah. definitely this should be like a role model for the upcoming FIS winter, for the Alpine and for the Nordic, and we can imagine to not to send people outside or abroad especially, and do all the work back home in Vienna. Yeah, I don't know what it's going to be when we are act as a real host broadcaster for the international signal, like in Sweden. I don't know what's it going to be, but for when we are having, or better said, when we are going to Slovenia or Sweden or something like this, we leave the people back home in Austria and just take the signal and send only one reporter instead of a presenter and a commentator and an expert commentator. So I guess we are going to save up a lot of money and keep the people safe.
Yeah. And like I suppose going forward, there will be quite a lot of efficiencies for us, you know, as broadcasters. Mateja, if I could come to you next, because Martin just mentioned there about what it might be like as a host broadcaster, which would be different to when we're getting a signal from a host broadcaster elsewhere. And you know that you've got the biathlon coming up in the winter season. How are you planning for that event at the moment?
Already before this pandemic, we have been trying to minimize our staffs as much as possible. But regarding to remote production in Pokljuka or in Slovenia, there is basically no infrastructure that would allow remote production. So as a host broadcaster, we need to go in with all our OB events and technicians and production staff. So we cannot minimize more than we already did. As the future is so uncertain and we do not know how it will be next February, we are trying to do our best. We are trying to find the plan A, plan B, plan C to do the production from Pokljuka. And of course, we will obey all the safety regulations that will be in place for the event itself, either set by IBU or Slovenian health authorities. But anyway, biathlon is a very difficult event regarding the TV production.
In Ireland, in Dublin, in December, we're host broadcasting the European Cross Country Championships as well, and in the same way as yourself, Mateja, and other smaller broadcasters, remote production it's a costly solution, and it isn't like I suppose it's challenging to be able to do something like that. Brigitte, if I could come to you, because I suppose at the end of the day, what we're all about is to try and talk to our audiences and to try and keep connected with the fans. You know, we have that in common with the federations together as well. And so what are you doing as a broadcaster to increase, you know, that connection to, you know, watch together, engage with your favorite stars, commentary from legends of the sport, etc.? Like, what have you developed in around that side of things?
We have like social, we have radio, we have TV, and the first two, that's more easier to create, to create new stuff, to create at this time new things. And TV, that's always, that takes more time. So but what and at the beginning of COVID, we had like the brainstorm sessions. What are we going to do? What are we going to plan? What can we broadcast? Do we have the financial possibilities to do it? Because like what we had in this big sports summer coming up in financial kind of view, it was limited because there was no sport. So all those things we had to take care of. And yeah, there were some new programs. We started some new programs, but all with historical features. And now we are doing a program. It's called My Sports Summer with it's a TV show with two famous people from Holland, and they take their most the highlights of sports, and we make a program around that. So we are developing because there's no live things. And then regarding the Tour de France, yeah, that's difficult. I really don't know what we're going to do. It's difficult to talk, for a little example for that, it's difficult to talk to the cyclists because they are going to live in a bubble. How is journalism possible even over there? They're cycling, they're going back to their hotel, and that's it. So we're trying to create like a chat box which we can give to the cyclists so that we can have contact during the Tour de France. So that kind of development is going on, and we're brainstorming, thinking about it, what's possible.
That sounds great. There's a couple of questions coming in there for the panel. So if you can, or if you have any other questions, please do send them in and we'll get to them in just a few minutes. Yolanda, you know, we're talking here and we are very aware of the fact that COVID-19 is still very much amongst us. And so things can change very, very quickly. And have you got, or are you working on any contingency plans to keep your sports content offering going should live sport come to a halt again?
Oh, no, to be honest, we've been a lot of months with archive material, and it's really hard for the spectators. At the beginning, it works, of course. You like to watch old things. But after 1 month, it was really poor audiences. So people want live material, live events, and that's why there's many leagues coming back before everything was settled and healthy, safe. But I don't think anybody right now is thinking on going back. I think we are focused on coordinating what's coming on, recovering the normality, and if this comes back again, we'll see. Now we are not ready, to be honest, and we don't think about it.
It is really challenging and none of us really want to think about it either. I don't think, you know. I mean, we had to turn around and to make, like, I suppose a lot of us are focused on live content. So when live content disappears and you're asked to produce content, it's a very different ask of the team as well. And there was, I think, well, certainly for our audience, there was a archive fatigue at the end of it as well. So it's hard to look and plan for something like that again. So, you know, fingers crossed. Thanks very much for the questions.
And I wanted to add only that I think everybody in our minds, not only us, also spectators, what they think is this is a break on our lives, and everything will come as usual, as our real life will come again. So that's why I don't think everybody is thinking on doing the same as last one.
Absolutely. Catherine van der Perre, thanks very much for sending in a few questions there for the panel. So the first question that Catherine has sent in is for Brigitte. And the question is, how will you manage in case one of your people is tested positive during the Tour de France? And this means, so in terms of taking your staff back, I suppose, like, it's interesting to hear Formula One and what Formula One is doing around social bubbles, and that's not feasible, I suppose, for a lot of broadcasters. But what have you got plans in place, Brigitte, for what if something like this was to happen?
Yeah. Today I had a meeting with ASO, and they want everyone to be tested before they enter the Tour de France. If you're not tested and you don't have, like, I'm negative on COVID, you cannot enter the Tour de France. That's the beginning. And then during the Tour de France, they've got a live laboratory with them. So you can be tested every day if you want. If you're feeling sick, you can be tested, and the results will be there in 2 or 3 hours. So that's quick. But the further procedure from ASO point of view, I don't know. They're still working on it. From NOS point of view, we have like a group of 15 people in the Tour de France. We have a backup for everyone. So we've got 15 people at home who can change the positions during the Tour de France. If someone gets sick, of course, he stays separate from the rest. And we have, like, all the people in the surroundings of him are going to be tested. for that, we're also planning on making our own bubbles. So 2 or 3 people are traveling together all the time during Tour de France, sleeping in the same hotel. So that's what we can do. And if one is getting sick, there will be like a solution for him, whether he has to go to a hospital in France, or we can arrange transportation home for this person. So that's how we're going to do it. For the teams in the Tour de France, as I said, there will be a bubble. But regarding a positive test, I don't know what the ASO is going to decide. If the whole team is going out, I don't know yet. They have to decide, I guess.
Thanks, Brigitte. There's time yet. And Mateja, Catherine is asking the same question of yourself around the Tour de France, and have you got plans in that regard?
Hopefully everything will be okay, and we will not have to find out a solution. We are much smaller than NOS. As I mentioned, only 4 people are going to France. This is 2 ENG crews, 2 + 2, basically 2 small groups of people. If somebody gets sick, I guess we will try to find ad hoc solution for alternative journalist or a cameraman to send to France, and to bring the sick person as quick as possible and safely as possible to home country. But as I said, as I mentioned, hopefully we will not have to resort to this.
Okay, and Jose Pinto de Fonseca from Portugal as well is saying that your experience is very similar to their experience in Portugal as well. If I can come back to you, Trevor, just around the social bubbles, because I suppose it's interesting what it's like for a federation then when you're intensely working with people for a period of time. And you can't mix with others or go home or that. What is that like, and how challenging is that, I suppose, for the team? Or what do you do together, I suppose, over the period as well?
It is challenging, and the team are being asked a lot to follow the rules that have been put into place. I mean, we have clearly a large team on site, but in order to manage difficulties that might arise from a positive test, we have each of the smaller teams split across 3 hotels. So, for example, should a member of the team become ill in one hotel, it doesn't affect a whole sort of sub bubble, because they're not all in the same hotel, for example. So we can manage because again it's a scale thing as well. So we have 3 hotels which are entirely Formula One management staff, so there's nobody else there other than the hotel staffs themselves, and we make sure that we've provided sufficient facilities in the evenings and subscriptions to Netflix and things like that. So people, because we're telling them they can't go out, that they have to stay in the hotels, and making sure that we can make them as comfortable as possible in that sense. I mean, in terms of the bubbles themselves, these are incredibly well defined. So, for example, in our broadcast compound, we have our broadcast facility. There's an OB truck. Even though they're in the same compound, the bubbles are such that if you're only expected to be in the truck, you can't go into the broadcast, our broadcast center, and vice versa. And everybody fully understands the requirements for that and comply with that. TV compound's a little bit different, the international broadcast compound, because we have lots of people coming in from different nations there, but all of whom have had to comply with the same testing regimes. But I guess comes a point where we, having had advised everybody on what best practice is and certainly what the requirements are for entering the Grand Prix event, that they also adopt the same approach that we do to having the same little bubble of people traveling in and out in the same vehicle, that they're staying in one hotel, or try to, if there are bigger teams, split across 2 hotels, so that we can minimize any problems that come from a positive test being detected. There's testing all of the time at the track, very well scheduled as well. What else do I want to say about that? I think generally, you know, I think as Yolanda said, it's kind of, it's where we are today with all of this, and you can never do too much, but provided you've planned fully, you've identified where your risks are. You know, for example, normally we'd send cameramen into the team's garages. We can't do that now. We would normally, you know, be able to go in and install equipment, cameras on the cars. We can't do that now. We communicate via Teams to the teams to be able to let them know what needs to be done, and there's drop-off points at the garages so that we can leave the equipment for them to install. So, you know, every single aspect of what we do has been looked at, but from the point of view of maintaining good health for the whole of the group of people that are at the track.
Thanks very much, Trevor. And you answered Jose Pinto's question just on the restrictions around TV compounds as well. So we're right out of time. I want to thank Trevor, Brigitte, Martin, Mateja, and Yolanda very much for all of your time and your insights, and to all of you for listening as well. I'll hand back to Elsa in Geneva now. Thank you.
We will have another event like this in September. It will be focused on COVID responses from a more strategic point of view, and we hope to see all of you there. The best of luck to everyone for your upcoming events and your projects. I wish you a very nice afternoon and a happy summer to everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
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 Thanks.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.